The colony of Arcadia 7 shimmered beneath the twin suns of the Lyria system, a beacon of human resilience in the vast frontier. Its sprawling cities blended seamlessly with the planet's verdant landscape, a testament to humanity's ability to build beauty even in the harshest conditions. Children's laughter echoed through the streets as workers filed home from the towering biodomes, their faces etched with the contentment of a thriving life. Captain Aria Callis surveyed the scene from a balcony high above the capital. Her sharp, weathered features bore the marks of countless battles, but her piercing green eyes betrayed a flicker of peace. Retirement had never suited her, but Arcadia had offered something few colonies did, a chance to build, not destroy. Behind her, a soft voice broke the stillness. "You're still staring at sunsets, as if they're enemies to conquer." Arya turned to see Dr. Ilara Voss, a slender woman with streaks of silver running through her dark hair. Ilara's white lab coat was flecked with dust, and a tablet rested under her arm, glowing faintly with unread data. "Habit," Arya replied, her lips twitching in a half-smile. "What brings you up here? Thought you'd be buried in your lab." Ilara's expression turned grim. Routine seismic scans picked up something unusual beneath the surface. Small tremors, localized around the southern ridge. Arya frowned. "Fault activity? Possibly. But it's strange. The patterns don't match any geological data we've cataloged." Ilara hesitated, then added, "We should keep an eye on it." Before Arya could respond, the air was pierced by a sharp, mechanical whine. She froze, instincts honed over decades of combat kicking in. The whine crescendoed into a deafening roar as the sky above Arcadia erupted in streaks of red and orange. "Missiles," Arya breathed, horror seizing her. Explosions tore through the tranquility of the colony. Arcadia's biodomes shattered like glass under the relentless bombardment. Buildings crumbled, sending clouds of dust and debris into the air. The laughter of moments ago was replaced by screams, the kind that cut through bone and burrowed into the soul. Ilara grabbed Arya's arm. "We need to move." But Arya was already sprinting to the comm station. Slamming her fist against the controls, she barked, "This is Captain Callis. Arcadia is under attack. Evacuate civilians to the underground shelters immediately." Static crackled back at her, mingling with fragmented cries for help. The communications tower had taken a direct hit. Ilara pulled her back. "There's no time. The defense grid won't hold against this kind of assault." "They shouldn't even be able to find us," Arya growled, grabbing a rifle from the emergency rack. "Arcadia's location is classified." Her words were cut off as another explosion rocked the building, sending both women sprawling. Arya scrambled to her feet, dragging Ilara up with her. "We have to get to the command center." Through the chaos, they made their way to the central plaza, where Sergeant Lyra Hale was rallying a group of armed defenders. Her short-cropped hair was streaked with blood, and her uniform was scorched, but her voice carried over the din with unwavering authority. "Form a perimeter around the eastern corridor. Don't let the evacuees get cut off," Lyra shouted, shoving a rifle into the hands of a trembling recruit. Arya's presence was like a jolt of electricity. The soldiers straightened, fear momentarily replaced with determination. "Report," Arya demanded. Lyra's face was grim. "Gruthak forces confirmed. They hit us from orbit before we could even raise shields. We've got limited anti-air, and most of our heavy artillery is offline." Arya cursed under her breath. The Gruthak Empire, merciless scavengers who thrived on the destruction of fledgling colonies. Arcadia, with its advanced tech and resources, was a prime target. Ilara stepped forward, urgency in her voice. "We can't hold this position. The vault." "No," Arya snapped, cutting her off. "That's a last resort." Ilara's jaw tightened. "You said it yourself, they shouldn't have found us. If they've come this far, they won't stop until we're ash. You know what we need to do?" Before Arya could respond, a low, guttural growl reverberated through the air. The defenders froze as a hulking Gruthak war machine lumbered into view. Standing 3 stories tall, its jagged armor bristled with plasma cannons, and its insectoid legs crushed everything in its path. "Fall back," Arya bellowed, raising her rifle and firing at the advancing monstrosity. The plasma bolts fizzled harmlessly against its energy shields. The defenders retreated in a controlled panic, shepherding civilians toward the shelter tunnels. Lyra stayed behind, laying down suppressive fire with a handheld rocket launcher. The explosion struck the machine's leg, slowing its advance but not stopping it. Arya grabbed Lyra's shoulder. "You've done enough. Go." Lyra hesitated but obeyed, her gaze lingering on Arya with a mixture of respect and sorrow. Alara stood her ground beside Arya, her expression defiant. "I'm not leaving either." "Damn stubborn scientist," Arya muttered, but there was no time for argument. Another explosion hurled them backward, separating them in a cloud of dust. When Arya opened her eyes, the plaza was in ruins. The Gruthak machine loomed closer, its cannons swiveling to target the remaining survivors. Gritting her teeth, Arya struggled to her feet, her rifle shaking in her hands. A shadow fell over her, and she looked up to see the machine's weapons charging, the glow of plasma intensifying. Suddenly, a deafening roar split the air, not from the machine, but from the depths of the southern ridge. The ground trembled violently, and a massive fissure cracked open, swallowing entire sections of the plaza. The machine hesitated, its cannons faltering as the roar echoed again, primal and otherworldly. Alara, covered in dust but alive, appeared at Arya's side, her eyes wide with a mixture of fear and vindication. "They're awake." Arya stared at her. "You didn't." Alara's lips curled into a grim smile. "I told you it was time." The machine fired again, but this time it wasn't humans who answered. From the fissure emerged a shadow larger than any Gruthak war machine. Metallic scales gleamed under the firelight, and glowing eyes fixed on the enemy with predatory malice. The creature's wings unfurled, casting the battlefield in darkness, and when it opened its mouth, the roar that followed was a harbinger of destruction. Arya's breath caught in her throat. "What have you done?" Alara stepped forward, her voice calm amidst the chaos. "What we had to. The Gruthak just woke the dragons." The shadowed figure descended upon the enemy machine, and for the first time since the attack began, the tide began to turn. Arya didn't know whether to feel relief or dread as the creature unleashed its fury. But one thing was clear: humanity's fight was far from over. The fissure in the earth widened as the monstrous form of the dragon emerged, its massive wings unfurling with a metallic sheen that caught the glow of distant fires. Its scales, black as obsidian, rippled with the heat of plasma energy coursing beneath them. The Gruthak war machine swiveled its cannons to target the behemoth, but before it could fire, the dragon moved. It was a blur of predatory power. Talons, like sharpened steel, raked through armor plating, as though it were paper. The alien war construct crumpled, its shield generators sparking futilely. The dragon's maw opened, and a searing torrent of blue-white plasma flame poured forth, incinerating what remained of the machine. Arya Callis stood transfixed, her rifle lowered, heart hammering in her chest. She had seen destruction, commanded it even, but this was a force beyond anything she had ever imagined. Beside her, Alara Voss watched with grim satisfaction, her eyes reflecting both fire and vindication. "It listens to you?" Arya's voice was low, almost accusing. Alara kept her gaze on the battlefield, where the dragon now prowled through the wreckage, its massive tail smashing aside Gruthak drones like toys. "It listens to its nature," she said quietly. "And its nature is to protect." More tremors shook the ground. Across the ridge, another fissure split open, and from it rose a second dragon, this one crimson-scaled, with eyes that burned like molten lava. It stretched its wings wide, blotting out the smoke-cloaked sky. Arya clenched her fists. You told me they were only concepts, prototypes, theories. How long have they been under our feet? Since the beginning of the colony, Alara admitted. They were the contingency plan no one wanted to need. Genetic engineering? Alien tech. Arya's voice sharpened with suspicion. A fusion of both, Alara confirmed. Built on Draconis 9 before the project was classified and moved here. The dragons are sentient constructs, designed to bond with human protectors. It was meant to be a last defense if humanity ever faced extinction. She turned her full gaze on Arya. The Gruthak came too close today. You know this. They would have wiped us out. Arya stared at her friend, weighing anger against understanding. She had spent her life fighting wars on the frontiers of human space, where survival was measured in grit and sacrifice. The idea of wielding creatures of myth as weapons was an ethical abyss she had no desire to navigate. Yet the proof stood before her. 2 living, breathing dragons that had saved what little remained of Arcadia. A sudden rush of air whipped past them as the black dragon circled back, landing with a reverberating thud. Dust and embers swirled as its eyes, intelligent, ancient, and cold, locked on Arya. She felt the weight of its gaze, a pressure that seemed to burrow into her mind. Instinctively, her hand moved toward her weapon. Don't, Alara warned. The dragon lowered its massive head, steam venting from its nostrils. It was close enough that Arya could see the intricate patterns of its scales, a labyrinth of metallic threads woven with organic sinew. Beneath the surface, plasma veins pulsed in a steady rhythm. With a deep breath, she relaxed her grip. The creature remained still. It's waiting, Alara whispered. For what? Alara stepped forward, her voice steady. For you. The dragons are not mere constructs. They recognize intent. You were the one who gave the order to protect this world. Arya's heart pounded. She felt a presence, vast and unyielding, brushing the edges of her consciousness. It was not invasive, it was an invitation. The air between them grew charged, a connection forming through something far older than language. I didn't ask for this, she murmured. Neither did they, Alara replied softly. The connection snapped into place. In a flood of understanding, Arya felt the dragon's mind touch hers. Images of ancient battles, of stars burning, of worlds defended and worlds lost. It wasn't submission. It was a partnership forged in shared purpose. The dragon's name came unbidden to her lips. Nyx. The dragon responded with a low, resonant growl that vibrated deep into the earth. As the bond solidified, the second dragon, crimson-scaled and fierce, landed nearby, its molten eyes fixed on Alara. The scientist did not falter, raising her hand in a silent command. The dragon's breathing slowed, and it lowered its head in recognition. What's its name? Arya asked. Inferna, Alara answered, a small, weary smile touching her lips. Nyx. Inferna. Arya shook her head as the weight of the moment settled in her chest. This is madness. It's survival, Alara countered. A crackling sound interrupted them. Arya turned sharply as Lyra Hale approached, her armor scorched, but her eyes burning with determination. Commander, enemy forces regrouping on the northern ridge. We don't have the manpower to hold them back. Arya's jaw tightened. How many? 2 battalions, heavy artillery, and air support incoming, Lyra said grimly. They'll overwhelm us within the hour. Alara stepped forward. Then it's time we fight fire with fire. Arya met her gaze, the truth undeniable. She nodded once, her expression hardening. Get the dragons ready. The sky above Arcadia 7 burned with the fire of falling wreckage as the Gruthak fleet unleashed its fury. Their ships hovered like ominous shadows, pouring down streams of plasma fire that tore into the remaining defensive structures. The once thriving colony lay shattered, Its biodomes collapsed, the proud spires of human achievement reduced to rubble. In the midst of the carnage, smoke and flame rising into the darkened heavens, two titanic forms broke through the haze. Nyx and Inferno moved as storms made flesh, their wings carving the air with each powerful beat. The black-scaled Nyx surged forward, his plasma-charged roar cutting through the cacophony of battle like a clarion call of vengeance. Inferno followed, her crimson scales glowing with searing heat, the air around her rippling as if the atmosphere itself bent to her will. Together, they swept over the northern ridge where Gruthak forces gathered in relentless waves. Arya Callis gripped the saddle-like harness strapped to Nyx's back, the connection between them alive in her mind, a torrent of raw, shared purpose. Every beat of his wings pulsed through her, every strike of his claws resonated as though her own hands wielded the power. She leaned forward, eyes locked on the advancing artillery, her voice a low snarl. "Strike hard," she whispered. "Show them what fury looks like." Nyx banked hard to the left, his wings slicing through the dense air. Plasma cannons below swiveled to track his movement, but before they could fire he dove. A torrent of blue-white flame erupted from his maw, engulfing the line of machines. The explosion rippled outward, a blast wave that sent Gruthak's soldiers sprawling as their weapons melted under the heat. Inferno roared in response, diving into the fray with a ferocity unmatched. Her claws ripped through armored troop carriers, the metal groaning as she shredded it like cloth. She swept her tail in a devastating arc, sending Gruthak infantry scattering like leaves before a storm. From her jaws came a torrent of molten fire, consuming everything in her path. On the ground, Lyra Hale led a small band of defenders through the chaos, her rifle spitting controlled bursts of plasma at the encroaching Gruthak. She ducked as debris rained down, adrenaline keeping her limbs moving even as exhaustion clawed at her muscles. Overhead, the sky split with another explosion as a Gruthak gunship was torn apart by Nyx's relentless assault. Lyra spared a glance upward, her eyes wide with something between awe and disbelief. "We might actually have a chance," she muttered, wiping sweat and grime from her face. A shadow loomed behind her, massive and mechanical. She turned too late, a Gruthak war machine, its legs like towering pillars of steel, leveled its cannon at her. A deafening roar drowned out the machine's whine of charging energy. Nyx descended from above, claws extended, and slammed into the war machine with earth-shaking force. Metal buckled, and the cannon shattered as the dragon tore into it with savage precision. Lyra stared, breathless, as Arya's voice echoed from the comms. "Stay alive, Sergeant." "Planning on it, Commander," Lyra muttered, scrambling back to cover as the ground quaked beneath her. Alara Voss, riding atop Inferno, felt the burning surge of their connection intensify with every movement. Inferno's power radiated through her, an unstoppable force that fed her resolve. "There," she directed, eyes narrowing on the Gruthak command center. "Burn them to the ground." Inferno roared again, her body a living furnace as flames poured forth in a concentrated blast. The command structure, fortified and bristling with turrets, melted under the onslaught. Gruthak officers within had no chance to flee as the Inferno consumed them. The explosion that followed shook the battlefield, a final punctuation to their defeat. The tide was turning, but victory was not yet certain. In the distance, the largest Gruthak dreadnought hovered ominously, its cannons powering up for a final, devastating strike. Arya felt the charge of energy building in the air, a deadly hum that thrummed through her bones. She closed her eyes, the bond with Nyx deepening as she reached for the full measure of their connection. "We stop that ship, or we all die." Nyx beat his wings, rising high above the battlefield. Inferno followed, her fiery gaze locked on the massive warship. Together, they ascended, twin forces of destruction moving as one. The dreadnought unleashed its barrage, a storm of plasma that streaked toward them. Nyx twisted in midair, evading with preternatural grace, while Inferna countered with a torrent of flame that intercepted the incoming fire. The sky blazed with a clash of energies, a maelstrom of light and fury. They closed the distance. The dreadnought loomed like a leviathan, its hull bristling with turrets that turned their deadly gaze upon the dragons. "Now," Arya commanded, her voice a blade of steel. Nyx surged forward, plasma building in his core. He opened his jaws wide, unleashing a blast of concentrated energy that struck the dreadnought's main reactor. Inferna followed with a final inferno, her fire searing through the weakened hull. The reactor detonated. Fire and metal erupted outward as the dreadnought tore itself apart in a blinding explosion. The shockwave rippled through the atmosphere, shaking the heavens as the mighty warship fell. Arya gritted her teeth as Nyx fought against the force of the blast, wings straining. Inferna roared defiantly, her form outlined in flame as she pushed through the chaos. The battlefield fell silent, save for the crackling of flames and the distant groans of dying machinery. The Gruthak forces, leaderless and broken, retreated in disarray. Arya looked down at the ruins of Arcadia 7. Victory had come at a cost, but they had survived. She placed her hand on Nyx's scales, feeling the steady pulse of his heart beneath her palm. "We're not done yet," she whispered. The dragon growled softly in agreement, eyes still blazing, as the horizon awaited.